Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about something incredibly powerful and, to be honest, pretty devastating. We're looking at the life and the final work of the environmental journalist Tatiana Schlossberger, who passed away in December 2025. She was just 35.
Yeah, this is a tough one. It's a story that you have to handle carefully, not just because it's a personal tragedy. I mean, so young with two little kids, but because her last year really forced this collision between her work, her life's commitment to science and policy, and her own very urgent medical fight.
Right. So our mission here is to really understand who she was as a journalist, the kinds of systems she analyzed, and how her final essay, which is just heartbreaking, used her own terminal diagnosis to critique the very health system she was relying on to survive.
And the timeline alone is it's overwhelming. In May of 2024, she's diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, AML.
And this is just hours after giving birth to her second child.
Hours.
Yeah.
That jump from a maternity ward to an oncology unit. I mean, that's the whole foundation of this final piece of journalism she produced.
So, okay, before we get to that final essay, we need to talk about her work, the kind of reporter she was. She came from this, very famous family, JFK's granddaughter, Caroline Kennedy's daughter, but she really built her career on a foundation of rigorous scientific reporting.
Absolutely. She went to Yale, then Oxford for American history, and she carved out a serious reputation for herself as a science and climate reporter, first at the New York Times, and then writing for places like The Atlantic and The Washington Post. She wasn't a personality. She was a serious journalist.
And all of that work, all that expertise, it kind of came together in her 2019 book, Inconspicuous Consumption, The Environmental Impact You Don't Know You Have.
It's the perfect title for her whole approach.
Right.
Because where a lot of climate writing is about smokestacks and oil spills, the big visible stuff. Schlossberg was always more interested in the hidden systems behind our daily lives.
So she broke it down into 4 areas.
Yeah, technology, food, fashion, and fuel. Her whole goal was to show you the true cost of convenience.
She really liked getting into the weeds on things, digging into that complexity. Can you give us an example from the book, something that shows the scale of what she was looking at?
Oh, for sure. So take technology.
Yeah.
We all think about, charging our phones. But she went so much deeper. She investigated the whole digital supply chain.
You mean like where the parts come from?
Exactly. The mining for the rare metals in your phone, the insane amount of energy that data centers use to power the cloud and let you stream movies, the global shipping networks for all the stuff you buy online.
So it was never just about, hey, recycle your old iPhone. It was about exposing this huge, invisible global machine that makes our digital lives possible.
Precisely. She had this knack for breaking down really complicated systems into facts you could actually understand. And her big takeaway from the book wasn't that, banning plastic straws is pointless. It was that the climate crisis is this really big problem with a lot of moving parts, and you can't solve it with just individual choices. You need huge systemic change.
And that kind of thinking got her a lot of respect. The book won the Rachel Carson Environment Book Award in 2020. That's a huge deal in that field.
It is. And it shows she really understood how to hold these giant, complex systems accountable.
Yeah.
Which, tragically, is the exact skill she had to apply to her own illness.
Which brings us to that awful pivot in May 2024. One day, she's swimming a mile while 9 months pregnant, and the next she's getting this crushing AML diagnosis.
Acute myeloid leukemia. It's a blood cancer that moves incredibly fast, so the treatment has to be immediate and just brutal.
And for her, it was a relentless battle. 18 months of chemotherapy, 2 bone marrow transplants.
One from her own sister.
And then these cutting-edge clinical trials like CAR T-cell therapy.
Yeah, and we should probably explain what CAR T is, because it's so central to her story.
Okay, yeah.
So CAR T is this. It's a revolutionary immunotherapy. They literally take your own immune cells, your T cells, out of your body. They genetically engineer them in a lab to be better cancer killers, and then they infuse them back into you.
So they're weaponizing your own immune system.
Exactly. It's the absolute frontier of personalized medicine. It's also, often the last-ditch effort when nothing else is working.
And for her, tragically, it didn't work.
No. Her cancer had this rare mutation called inversion 3, which made it extremely resistant to treatment. So she got the prognosis that nobody ever wants to hear. A year, maybe?
And that timeline is what led to her writing this incredible final essay for The New Yorker. It's so journalistically precise, but it's also just emotionally raw.
Oh, completely. And the first thing she writes about is her kids. Her son, who was a toddler, and the newborn daughter she barely knew, she wrote about the fear that they wouldn't remember me.
God, and she lamented that she never really got to be a mother to her daughter because the risk of infection was too high. She wrote, "I don't know who, really, she thinks I am."
It's just crushing. And then there's this added weight of her family's history of tragedy. She wrote about trying to be good and to protect my mother, and just being devastated that she was adding a new tragedy to their lives.
But even in all that darkness, she finds these moments of gratitude. She uses her journalist eye to document them.
Right. She talks about the oncology nurses, calling them more competent, more full of grace and empathy. And she describes her husband, George Moran, as a kind, funny, handsome genius. She grounds this huge tragedy in these very real human connections.
But her reporter instincts, that policy watchdog brain, it just wouldn't turn off. Even as she's fighting for her life, she's watching the U.S. health system, and she's watching her own cousin, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., take over as the head of Health and Human Services.
And this is where the story shifts. It goes from a personal tragedy to this massive public policy alarm bell, because she's fighting a disease that only cutting-edge research can beat, and she starts seeing decisions being made that she believes are actively tearing down the very research system she needs.
It's just an unbelievable position to be in. How did she write about that, critiquing a family member while facing her own death?
She did it the same way she wrote her book, by focusing on the facts, the hard numbers. And her main alarm was his decision to cut nearly $500 million from research into mRNA technologies.
Okay, so when most of us hear mRNA, we immediately think COVID vaccines. What was the connection for her cancer treatment?
That is the absolute critical link. mRNA isn't just for viruses. It's seen as one of the most promising paths to creating personalized cancer vaccines, things that could revolutionize treatment for rare, aggressive cancers like hers. It's directly tied to the future of CAR-T therapy.
So from her hospital bed, she's seeing the funding being cut for the very science that might have been her only hope.
That's exactly how she saw it. And she saw the impact immediately. She wrote about 180 researchers at Columbia, where her husband works, getting laid off because of those federal cuts. And that uncertainty just spread like wildfire to places like Memorial Sloan Kettering, where she was being treated.
So a policy decision in Washington has this immediate effect. It's not abstract. It means lost jobs, lost momentum, right at the institutional level, at the bedside.
And her critique went even broader. She pointed to him filling CDC advisory panels with vaccine skeptics, dismissing 17 experts. She saw the whole scientific foundation of public health being weakened, system by system.
There was also a smaller, but really pointed, reference to the drug misoprostol.
Yes, which is a perfect example of her method. Misoprostol is politically charged because it's used in abortions, but she points out that she needed it to treat a postpartum hemorrhage right after her daughter was born.
So she's showing how an ideological fight over one use of a drug can threaten access for a completely different life-saving medical need.
Exactly. It's the ultimate example of her life's work. She's showing how these big, abstract policy decisions have direct, immediate, and sometimes fatal consequences for real people.
She spent her career exposing the inconspicuous consumption that damages the environment. And her last act was to expose the inconspicuous damage of policy choices. Damage that decides who gets access to research and who lives and who dies.
That's her legacy right there. Her final essay is the proof. It's the direct line from a $500 million budget cut to a person's individual fight for survival. It shows that public health funding isn't just some number in a spreadsheet. It's the difference between hope and a terminal diagnosis.
So when you're listening to this, what's the one thing you should really take away from this story?
I think her whole career was about fighting the damage that's hiding in plain sight. Now that you've seen how high the stakes are for research funding, you should ask yourself, what other policies, ones that seem totally remote or, inconspicuous, are deciding the future of science you might need one day? We all assume these systems are stable, but our story shows how quickly they can become strained, how quickly momentum can be lost when politics shift. And that's a question that goes way beyond just cancer research. It's about the future of discovery itself.